management and use agreement for Silver Creek Corner property.
Move, a motion to move the consent agenda.
I got there first.
All right.
Hey, one quick question before we go.
Yeah.
Even for her?
She's online.
Is she?
He's online.
Oh, she's online. Okay. Pardon me all the hell. Okay.
No, I appreciate that.
There she
Okay.
is.
Tanya.
All right, so since Tanya's online, we're gonna have to do roll calls. Tanya,
Once again, I'm clueless.
Yes.
okay? Matt? Sheila?
Hi.
Greg?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Stephanie?
Hi.
Passes. I say aye, passes. Okay. Now we move to the discussion decision items.
This is really loud.
It too loud?
Okay, the microphones are turned up. We're having much more amplification than usual.
A little further away.
Yeah, me too.
Whisper.
Yeah. Which will also be amplified, Jim, is by the way.
Oh, they really close.
You're too loud.
Until Mike is here, we'll be.
Okay, so first, discussion decision items is approve rental assistance and land donation for Maywood 2 apartments. Who's first on this?
I don't think it's so much.
Mitch.
Mitch? Okay.
Mitch is the land baron.
I don't know if you have the right presentation.
Baroness.
Baroness, excuse me.
I don't know if you'd like, I'm
Nice
sure
to
it's
see you
like
in
to talk
person,
about the
Mitch.
balanced scorecard update.
It's nice to see you in
It's nice
person.
to see you as well. It's nice to be back.
Still recognize you.
Who are you again?
The new gal. This is really loud. My voice does not need a microphone on the best of days. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We are here to talk about this afternoon, to provide all of you with some updates on our Maywood 2 development project.
Oh, Melissa's here. Melissa
There
Brown.
we go. Did I do that or
Laurel's
did you?
campaign.
She did. Okay.
This happens all the time.
Technology is not my friend. I try really hard. All right, so we're going to be going over several aspects of our development project today. We're going to talk about the overview and the timeline. I'll walk you through who we are serving with this project and some of the building details. We're going to dive semi-deep into the application details and then follow up with some decision points that we are not asking you to make today, but that we will be bringing back in May for actual action upon. Starting with our project overview. So the Maywood 2 project we first brought to you again last fall. The internal staff who are working on this project is myself, Mark Engel from the planning department, who is joining us here today. So you'll be seeing his face in front of you a few more times before the project goes back to Minnesota Housing. And also Ashley Bruss. I do that every time. Our other key partners on this project include Larissa Ripley from Ripley Richards and Kim Brethheim from LHB as our architect and design firm. These are the two individuals who helped us with our application for Maywood 1. They work with a variety of HRAs across the state on similar development projects. They have an excellent track record of funded applications and working with the populations that we choose to prioritize and serve. They understand the process through Minnesota Housing and how to maximize our points, work with our partners in our community, and address our project goals. So throughout the course of this application process, which starts several months before it is due, we go through a variety of different benchmarks, both including public meetings where decisions are being made at both the county and HRA board level. The city level will also be involved on a variety of different things. We meet with the Southeast Minnesota Continuum of Care as they also have to give credence and validity to our project. That's part of our application back to Minnesota Housing. We work on a market study, which is currently happening, and then we do a variety of different projects regarding stakeholder input as well. So this is really a multifaceted project that involves a multitude of parties across the continuum. Today is actually our kickoff with Minnesota Housing. We have a 2-day training on how to put together our application. So that kicked off today, and they have been slowly releasing the application materials over the course of the last 10 days. So it's all been trickling out. this is a look at our timeline of the project. As you may recall, we first made our first official decision on this project last October when the board voted to move forward on a senior housing project that would be owned by the HRA. In December, we put together our development team of Larissa and Kim. And then now January through June, we've been working on the application. The application does change a bit from year to year, but many of the core tenets remain the same. So even though the application materials aren't released until April, this is a process we actually start back in June. It is due back to Minnesota Housing July 14th this year. They claim they will be releasing awards in December. And if that happens, we will move towards a quick closing and hope to break ground by October 2023 with a grand opening of October 2024.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can you help me understand why if we get from December till October, December 22 to October 23, what will happen during that phase is the design phase? It was really going to take 10 months?
Sure. So what happens during that phase is, yes, we are finalizing our design, we are selecting our building contractors, but also if we receive bonds, you can only close on bonds in September. And so that means we can't start that project till October. Also, because we have to close on whatever financing we receive from Minnesota Housing, whether it's 9% or 4% tax credits, we rely on their timeline for loan closing. And so not only are they closing on loans from this RFP, but a variety of other RFPs that they send out throughout the course of the year. So it's a matter of getting in line with the bank, so to speak.
Okay, so it's really administrative
Yes.
delay rather than project planning delay.
A little bit of both, but yes, heavy on the bank side of things.
Thank you.
Who are we serving with this project? So as we had already talked about, we are serving seniors with this project, which is defined as those age 55 and older. That is an age set by Minnesota Housing. The building itself is going to have 36 units. 18 of those units will serve households at or below 50% area median income, and 18 of those units will serve households at or below 30% area median income. We would like to serve, and we intend to serve more than those 18 units at or below the 30% mark. However, we have split these units in half for two reasons. One, we don't gain any more points from Minnesota Housing on our application if we do more than the 18 at 30% area median income. And we'll explain points here in a minute. But then also this also gives us a little bit of flexibility. Our goal is to fill these units quickly, and upon turn, we want them turned quickly. By allowing us to go up to 18 units at the 50% area median income, if we struggle to find lower income households, we're not having a unit open. We can continue to fill it. So even though it will be our priority, it does give us some wiggle room from an administrative standpoint. From our unit breakdown, there will be 31 bedroom units in the building. 3 of those will be fully handicap accessible. And there will be 6 two-bedroom units, of which 3 of those will also be fully handicap accessible. Of the 36 units, 7 units will serve high-priority households, or high-priority homeless households. Those could be 1-bedroom units, they could be 2-bedroom units, they could be fully accessible units. That's really based more on the individual applying rather than the physical unit that they are going into. What high priority homeless means is that those 7 units, in order to fill those units, we will be pulling from coordinated entry. So this is the system you are familiar with. We've talked about this several times. This is how we fill the 105 and the Francis as well. And with that, we will be providing case management for those 7 households. Building details. The building is going to be 3 stories. We will be having laundry and trash chutes on each floor. Each Each floor will also have some common areas. The main floor will have a mailroom and a sitting area, community room with a kitchenette, covered entryway, and all units will have universal design. We had initially hoped to do a covered entry that also overlapped where you would pull your car up. I believe it's officially called a porte cochere. Did I get that right? I'm learning all these new terms. But our site just does not allow for that. We just don't have enough room to do that. So we will be having a covered entry over the sidewalk up to the curb there for people, as well as a nice enclosed vestibule inside the building. Outside we'll also have a variety of common areas and green space as well. So this is the approved Maywood site plan. The building there up at the top of your screen is the existing Maywood 1. Over to the left side of the screen is going to be the Maywood 2. So as you may recall with Maywood 1, we had to go through a restricted development process with the city planning department. Mark and I are already starting to work on all of that. And this is our anticipated layout then for the site. A lot of this work we got done the first time around with Maywood 1. So there's not a tremendous amount of designer work we have to do at this point. The stormwater pond is already there. You don't see it on this screen. But this parking also allows and accommodates both buildings. So a lot of that has already been completed, which is nice. We just received draft site plans yesterday. These are still, these are not in final form by any means, and so I realize they're very small to see, and I apologize for that, but they will be changing and tweaking as well. So I ask not to get too married to this exactly, but as you can see on here as you walk in, you have that lobby area. There'll be 2 office spaces there for property management and social service teams, community space, and then a nice split between the 1 and 2 bedroom units per floor. The units are small, and we had debated on whether we could make the units a little bit bigger to accommodate for some more storage. That proved very difficult, so on floors 2 and 3, you'll see that we do have some different storage areas that everybody will be able to utilize. We do have about 11 units that have larger closet availability, and so those storage areas will be for some of our smaller units. And this is a finished photo here of Maywood 1. I do not have new elevations for Maywood 2, so I included this just as a reminder of what we have out there. And the new building will look very similar to this in scale, color, and design. Some of our application details. So this is a highly competitive project. Minnesota Housing, through their consolidated RFP, we apply for all things at the same time. 9% tax credits, 4% tax credits, as well as housing infrastructure bonds. We can certainly go in and just ask for one of the 3. We have learned, however, and thanks to the help with Larissa Ripley, has learned over time that Minnesota Housing likes if we submit an application for all 3. Even though we know that our project will not score out well for 9% tax credits, Minnesota Housing likes that we include the paperwork for all 3 funding sources. And that way, as they look at the requests from across the state, they can best decide how to distribute their funds that they have available for the projects across the state. The extra paperwork is fairly minimal, and so it's not really a big deal from a staff standpoint at the end. But being that these are highly competitive applications, it's important that we put our best foot forward and we look at all of the controllable aspects of this that we can. There are points over several different areas that we can control in here. So points are awarded in this application for the population that you are serving, the number of units that are serving extremely low-income households, that would be our 30% area median income households, the number of high-priority households served, rental subsidies that are involved and dedicated to the project, the design of the building, the design of the units that people live in, the location in the community, as well as the location in the state. play an important factor. Stakeholder input, so are we investing in our own project? And local contribution, does the community support what we are trying to do? All of these different things impact the weight and the strength of our application. And we can afford to lose points in some areas if we can maximize points in the other areas. So as you may recall from one of the earlier slides, I stated that we are serving 7 units of high priority homeless. It may seem like an odd number, 7 units out of 36, but it's based on a percentage of total units in the building. And by serving 7 units, we maximize our points in that area of the application.
So give me, what's high priority homeless, Mitch? What's a high priority?
So high priority homeless is determined each year by the area continuum of care. So by looking at the data that they have in coordinated entry and the households in our area that need to be served, they determine county by county where the highest needs are for homeless individuals. In Olmsted County, it is, I want to make sure I get this right, so I'm also looking to Mary. Single adult individuals with serious and persistent mental illness. Am I correct? Feel free to correct me if I'm getting some of this wrong.
The chronic, so a disability.
A disability, so chronic homeless. So that is the population that our county recognizes as needing the most needs for homeless services and housing.
So they'd qualify for supportive housing and
Correct.
so on and so on.
Correct. And we will be providing those social service case management supports with existing contracts that we have to help serve those 7 households.
Okay.
We also get different points for location in the community, and this is a conversation I know that has come before the board several times about location. And it's also location in the state. So if our area of the state has been underserved in several recent years, we get a little boost. If we have 17 projects coming in 1 year from Rochester, we have higher competition. So all of that plays into it as well. The project that we design has to really toe the line between 2 things. What do we recognize as what our community needs? And also, how does that score out in a competitive application? And where sometimes it may feel like we are making decisions purely on points. I know that's how it sounds as we're talking about this. I think it's also important to remember that Minnesota Housing has been doing this for a lot of the years. And they've recognized why some of those points matter and why some of those decisions have been made. And they have a lot of history on why those things are successful and why they are important. And it holds us to a higher standard. By creating our units with universal design, we are creating better opportunities for our clients and our tenants that live in our units. Whereas if we didn't get points for that, there may be developers or other applicants who chose not to design their units using universal design. And then that impacts our clients who live in those units later. So there is a method to the madness. Sometimes we just have to remind ourselves of what that is. Points. So we have points around a variety of areas, as we just talked about. Right now I'm going to talk about 2 specific buckets, we're going to call them, of points that we are talking about. We are assuming right now that this project is a $12 million project. And there are 2 buckets of money that really impact heavily how our project weighs out. One of them is called other contributions, and in order to maximize our points here, it comes out to about 10.2% of our total project, or $1.224 million that we need to put into this bucket. This includes value of a land donation, waived fees that may come into play, pilot or TIF for taxes. And then the other bucket that we're talking about is financial readiness, which comes in at 10.5% of the total project, which in this case is about $1.26 million. This is the value of local contributions, where our partners and our community help support what we are doing. The problem is, and Dana, if you'd give one more click, it kind of works like a scale. So we need, in these 2 buckets, a total of $2.484 million. The problem is that a dollar is not equal among both buckets. So even if I have the total of $2.484 million total, if the buckets aren't at the 10.2% and 10.5%, we lose points. Dana, if you'd click again. Likewise, if I exceed both of my buckets that I need, my scale is still outweighed. I don't get more points for providing more money in those buckets. So it's on a sliding scale of points. The one bucket is worth 10 points, the other bucket is worth 16. And so if I come in at a portion of those points, I get a portion of that money, I get a portion of those points. But getting really generous in one bucket or the other doesn't gain me more points.
So which one's the 16-point bucket?
There we go. So our financial readiness is the 16-point bucket for 1.26 million. This is where we start looking at how we can add value to our project by working with our partners. And our partners in this are across the board. We'll be looking to Olmsted County to talk about the land that the project sits upon. Is the county able and willing to donate that land to the HRA for this project? We'll be looking to the city of Rochester to talk about some of the different fee waivers that are possible with this project. We'll be talking with Rochester Area Coalition about some cash support and assistance for the project. We'll be going to the Southeast Minnesota Continuum of Care in May for their support on provider and project viability. And the HRA will be asked also to support the project with a cash donation as well.
Do you see any problems with any of these? I mean, there's always could be potential, but are you feeling good about the other participants in this?
I think where we stand right now, we've had preliminary conversations with all of our partners, and there's been a lot of conversation over the last several months about how to submit a successful application from Rochester area. We've talked with staff at Minnesota Housing. Larissa Ripley, I know, has spoken with both us about scoring and the city about scoring and members of the coalition to help us all understand how to put our best foot forward and how a community needs to show that they support a project. And that has a lot of weight with the community. So we've been really setting these paving stones for the last several months. And as we start now in the end of April and beginning of May, having these more serious conversations and asking them to go to their boards in June for a final decision, I feel confident that we will be able to put our best foot forward with our partners and submit a strong, well-rounded application.
As you get these commitments or lack of commitments, make sure you keep us informed, as I know you will, so that if we need to make some phone calls or whatever, we can help you out if need be.
Thank you.
For the senior housing project, did they waive sack and whack on that one, the city?
Well, we haven't had those specific conversations yet with the city, but the city did work with Mark Engel about what some proposed costs we would have with the city. So we have an idea of what our fees are going to be, and that's what we'll be going back and having deeper conversations about.
Mitch, I think the question was phase one. I think that's what.
Oh, with phase
Yeah,
one,
it's phase one.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood
all right.
your question.
I'm just
I
going back
apologize.
in time saying what did they do?
I don't recall off the top of my head, and I don't recall if they received TIF or not.
They didn't. They received TIF, but they did not waive the fees. I think part of this is an opportunity for us as a community, and this is one of the unintended positive consequences of us going through this, is to learn what contributions you need to have a competitive application. And so part of this little scale thing that Mitch drew for you is going to be highlighted again and again, because I think understanding what that means and how a contribution needs to maybe be in another place in order for it to really be effective is a conversation we're going to continue to have with our partners.
Well, it's very important, a lot of, we've had a lot of talk in the past of how we're rah, but it'll be very interesting to make sure that we have the commitment to back those rah. And I probably should stop at this point.
History always. We were
Other
so ugly
questions
at.
on this slide before we move on?
No.
All
I
right, so-
actually have some questions. It's been from previous slides, but it's hard to see my hand over here, and I didn't speak up. This is Tanya. So I was just curious how this is called Mailwood 2, or did I say that correctly?
Currently, yes, that's what we have been
Yeah.
dubbing the project. We should probably have a deeper conversation about the name of the project.
I was just curious, how does it compare to the original as far as like I don't can you remind me how many beds? Um is this low income the other one? The original, the first one?
Mailwood 1 serves a slightly different population. Um, Building size is similar. I believe they are 40 units. And they are focused more on serving people who are homeless but also have different mental health concerns. So it's not an
Okay.
apples to orange or apples to apples comparison.
Okay. I guess I was more concerned about low income housing. Would you compare I guess to move forward to that, I was just curious because it said 18 beds were low income and 7 beds were high priority. Um, is that enough?
So the building itself is 36 units. That's what we were able to fit on this site.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it enough units? No, it's not. Our community has shown that we need more low income and extremely low income senior housing. We're hoping that by starting this one project, it will help spur other development.
How many other low income places are there in Rochester, Olmsted County?
Four seniors.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have that data in front of me off the top of my head, but that is certainly something I can gather and bring back to the board.
Well, I was just curious, and then I guess with that, then I was just wondering if the other beds, if there's any flexibility on the numbers, because if there's more of a need and I mean, I've seen a lot of fancy high risers for seniors, but not necessarily for low income. So just kind of throwing the need piece out there.
Are you asking about flexibility for our property or for other properties? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand.
I guess flexibility with the other 18 beds, or not 18, however many it's 11 maybe.
So,
So
Mitch, maybe
there's
I'm just going to jump in. I think, Tanya, to your question, all 36 units will be they'll be reserved, half of them for people at 50% of the area median income and the other half at people for 30% of the area median income. So
There
all
you
of the
go.
units in the
Okay.
proposal will be affordable.
So it's low and lower.
Okay.
I mean,
correct.
I appreciate the clarification.
Thank you. All right, Dana. So some decision points. Again, as a reminder, these are not decision points we are asking the board to make today. These will be coming back in May for decision. Today we're looking for discussion. There are two areas that we like to talk about. The first is a rental subsidy and the second is land acquisition. The rental subsidy piece, we will be coming back to the board and asking the HRA board to provide a rental subsidy for all of the units that equal the current payment standards. This would result in a resolution and a document that the board signs off on agreeing to do this for a 10-year period. As you recall, back when we were working on the Jeremiah project and we wanted to put some project-based vouchers into that project, there was just some different red tape and deadlines and scheduling with how we have to do that to follow HUD guidelines that made it difficult and impossible to do prior to the application going in. We ran into the same type of issue here with this. So if you may recall, would you like to ask your question first?
yeah, because I usually forget them. So with the rental subsidy, if we moved ahead with the rental subsidy, with the tax credits and all the blah blah blah, all at the end of the day, if we didn't have the rental subsidy, would we still have to be dumping? Somebody would have to be dumping money into it. I mean, besides what you get for rent and the tax credits and all that stuff.
Correct. So if we do not have a rental subsidy as part of this, application to Minnesota Housing requires that we set our rents at a level then that the people at 50% and 30% can afford.
Okay.
So you don't get that balance,
Okay.
which means that we have to set our rents very, very, very low. And yes, we would have operating deficits annually.
Okay, so I just want to understand how all the finances work, and I'm not trying to make a judgment one way or the other, but then if we do the rental subsidies, is part of that then out of the HRA pot of money that we do every year, we've got to throw some of that money into that rental subsidy? Is that how it works? I'm just a little
Correct.
unclear. Okay, all right,
Correct.
that's what I thought. I just want to make sure.
Correct. So that is what we are asking the board to approve for application purposes.
Okay.
If we are funded, we are able then to come back and change that rental subsidy to different pots of money. And what we would do at that point is ask the board to project base those units and use vouchers in the units rather than.
Yeah, that's where I was going. I probably got ahead.
Harken back to Jeremiah, we provided site-based vouchers,
Correct.
but not in time to get the application and the financing done. So we had to guarantee, in the event that we could not get the site-based vouchers applied, we guaranteed to provide that subsidy. Once they came through, our subsidy basically went away.
Correct.
Same thing here.
So it's
Correct.
like the Jeremiah thing,
Yeah.
like what we do with Jeremiah. Okay, that's
We
you gotta talk
we
slow.
fronted it sort of up front with the expectation that they'd get
to get it.
MH
Prime the pro.
Minnesota housing financing done, switch those into site-based vouchers, which then provides the subsidy required for those units.
Correct.
That's what
At
I
the
thought.
end of the day, Minnesota Housing wants to see that we are providing a commitment to rental assistance right now,
Mhm.
and that we will sign off on a 10-year commitment to that.
Gotcha.
If the pot of money in which that rental subsidy changes after funding, they don't care.
Don't care.
As long as the amount of the subsidy remains the same
same.
or better.
Right.
Does that
Okay.
make sense?
So yeah, no, it's like pretty much what we do with Jeremiah.
It's the way the beauty contest works.
Correct.
And you ain't gonna argue.
So we will be coming back in May for a decision on that.
Mitch, when we talked about this at a retreat, HRA was talking about some revenue sources. What I'm hearing, there is no revenue sources in this, if we build this. Because if we're subsidizing it with rental money, they are gonna pay a very low rate,
Where's another one?
personal pocket, and all the maintenance and everything. There's no way this will be a revenue source that I look at.
So our operating costs have to even out for Minnesota Housing. We have to be able to show that this project breaks even. So with the rental subsidies that come in, that all is part of our operating expenses. We still have to show that the property can sustain itself.
So we're taking it from one government entity to another. The theory with this was some revenue sources for the HRA into the future. I hear a financing package. There's no way there's gonna be a revenue source of these apartments. You know, it's nice to put the apartments up, but there's no revenue source because eventually you gotta replace the roof, you gotta do all this. There will be not a revenue source here.
Part of the package, that financial package we have to put together, includes reserves and all of those maintenance costs that we have to have in pocket. Similar to what we've done with our project with River's Edge and Bandel.
Yeah, I'll sit with Dave.
Yeah, the way that it's set up from Minnesota Housing is that all of these projects essentially break even. So there's a little bit of a profit at the end of the day, but not too much because they cap what your part of the pro formas that will be submitted cap what you can charge in rents, and then they have all of the rules as far as making sure that when the roof goes bad, there's capital in order to pay for it. Where we do get revenue is on the front end on the developer fee. So that's where when you develop affordable housing, regardless if you're the HRA or if you're Center City Housing or if you're Three Rivers or the late Joe Weiss, where you get funding on this is through your developer fee on the front end. And so I think for this, it is, is there a later, I'm looking at Mitch because it's like $950,000 of, I think,
That's what we
revenue
were looking for.
from the developer fee. So that's how the developer, regardless of whether it be public sector or private sector or whatnot, that's how they get paid, is through that developer fee. And then the game,
But long-term, 20, 30 years, this is not a revenue-producing building. It never will be.
It's not River's Edge. It's not the,
That's
it's not mixed income. is the issue.
issue here, and that was one of the concepts we talked about at retreat. We wanted to talk about a revenue producing to help supplement HRA. I just want to clarify that. I understand it, but you're right. It's not a river. I hear it's not a River's Edge or any other, which barely makes money. This will not be a revenue producing unit.
It will not produce the bottom line that River's Edge does. No, you are correct. It will not. But as senior housing, which is what the board also determined was their priority, was providing that low and extremely low income housing for our seniors, it will be a self-sufficient project.
And we can map that out. When we come back, we'll bring more of that information, so at least it's right in front of you and we'll be as transparent as we can be about kind of, because part of this will be a 15, at least a 15-year, if not longer, pro forma for the project that we have to kind of demonstrate the long-term, here's the costs, here's the expenses, here's how it all adds up, and then kind of be able to, I think, be able to bring that forward so you can have that conversation.
And maybe part of the confusion too is the statement is, and then maybe I'm confused, providing a rental subsidy for all units equal to payment standards. But not every unit will require a rental subsidy to reach the payment standard. Is that correct?
So the payment standard is what rents will be set at. So the subsidy plus the income of the individual, or the rent paid by the individual, has to equal that payment subsidy. So if the individual in the unit can pay $700 in their one-bedroom unit, then the subsidy is only $211, for example. So each subsidy for each unit will be different based on the income of the individual living in that unit. But the payment standard is the max rent for that unit.
But the projection is that everyone living in the building will have some level of rent subsidy.
Correct. That is the assumption. Other questions on the rental subsidy portion? And like I said, we'll be coming back in May for a decision item on that. The land acquisition piece.
So Mitch, I'm going to take us back to
Yes.
the question that my colleague here posed. Is there an option of providing 36 units of senior housing that is mixed income senior housing so it would produce revenue? And was that considered? I think that's really your question.
Yeah, that was what we talked about last summer.
So what happened to that concept over time? Why is this the recommendation?
It's a good question. So when we had talked about senior housing and looking at what our market studies and our senior housing studies have indicated as the highest need for the community, it was at that lower 50% and 30% area median income. And our staff understanding from the board at that point was to assist as many of those low and extremely low income households that we could. So if we wanted to go back and look at this and do a more mixed across the board, we can certainly do that. It's going to have different effects on building size and our application going forward at this point. And that is also something we can consider for a second project in a year as well. If that's the focus that we want to have.
So the summary is there's higher need among the lowest income seniors. And by designing a building that meets the lowest income seniors, we have the best opportunity to receive state bonding to help us with the construction to develop a building that sustains itself over time.
I think that is a wonderful summary of how we got to where we are. And also the board had made the indication to staff that we are able to serve those low and lowest income households better than anybody else can, better than a private developer can. We're better able to step up and meet those needs.
Thank you.
For the land acquisition piece, we'll be asking in May for the HRA to send a request onto the county board about donation of the land upon which this is going to sit. Currently, that land is owned by the county. It was portioned off for Mayowood 1 into 3 lots. Sublot B is now currently Mayowood 1. Sublot C is the stormwater pond, and that will remain in the county's name. But we will be asking for sublot A to be donated to the HRA. We've been working with the assessor's office on the value of that parcel, and what that would mean for tax purposes as well. And if we can present back to Minnesota Housing a donation on all or in a part of that land, it really does help set up the application best. It indicates that there is community involvement and support for the project. And being that that is a decision that must be made by the county board, it would be a recommendation from and request of the HRA board to the county board to make that official decision.
We've heard you all know people on the county board, so.
Yeah, I don't trust any of them.
So the next steps, as we had said here at the May HRA meeting, there'll be a resolution that'll come forward for approval for the rental assistance, and also an official request that the county board will that the HRA will put forward to the county board. The May County Board meeting will include, hopefully, a resolution approving that land donation to the HRA. And staff will be busy meeting with our community partners on those other project support items that we've previously talked about.
So probably an easy decision, donate the land. What's the value of it? Do you have a appraisal on that?
Currently, some different numbers that we're working with the assessor's office come out right around $650,000.
Okay.
So one of the things that happened there, just I think in full disclosure, Mitch, I could tell you like, I'm not sure. When we worked with Mailwood Phase 1, so when we worked with Center City, when that property was a little bit more flexible on its use, actually that process decreased the value of the land for Phase 2, which in some ways is good, in some ways is bad. So at one time that land was probably valued at about twice as much as it would be now because of its location and its ability for commercial development. But because of the work that's already done, it's kind of locked into multifamily housing. So.
And it is an improved piece of land, all the utilities and stormwater being there, so that does count in towards the value as well. So those numbers are still being tweaked, we're still working on all of that, but ballpark, right around that 650.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, Mitch, who manages this one? Is this going to be owned by HRA and managed by HRA?
It is going to be owned by the HRA. We are currently proposing in our application to manage it as well, as we've looked at some different options between keeping it in-house and outsourcing that property management. As we look at our staffing needs currently in the department and how to bring this in with some of those other items, at this point, that seems like the most cost-effective way to move forward with this project. If we choose to change that on the back end, if we gain points for that, then we lose those points on a future application. It gets into kind of a game of things.
We use some of our same people that are already
Yes.
managing other properties.
Correct. We're looking at all of those staffing needs right now, so it is all part of the equation. Other questions on what we've talked about here today? I've thrown a lot of information at you, I know.
You do a great job.
I try.
Okay, there's no decision on this.
No decision yet today. It'll come back to you in May. Just wanted to bring this onto everybody's radar.
Thank you, Mitch.
All right, thank you.
Okay, next up, approve housing department plan to invest youth and family homelessness prevention aid. Dave.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Dave Dunn, Housing Director, here to talk about our plans for investing some of the family and youth homeless aid money that will be coming our way here over the course of the next several months. So Mitch told me this didn't work. We're going to see.
Operator error or not?
Did you just seriously click that on your own?
Magic touch.
You know, you've got to have fun in what you do. This is extraordinarily serious work, and we are all working very hard, but you have to have fun. And so the fact that this, in fact, does work is my fun for the day. Good afternoon. Here to talk about our work around youth and family homelessness. I've got Melissa Brandt with Rochester Public Schools, who will be up here in a moment to share some thoughts. And then Mary O'Neill will also be available for questions. But what we're trying to do today is talk about our investment strategy, talk about our concept again, kind of like the last conversation we had. We're not asking for final decisions today per se, but our concept as we move forward to make sure that we're going in the right direction. And then as we start to really dig into some of the details and agreements and other things, that we're making sure that we're going the right way. So in summary, we're really looking to kind of do three things. So one is to hire some FTEs. The number right now that we put up there is 3, to address family homelessness in our community. The other thing, the question that we'll bring up to all of you today is building or buying a fourplex or some kind of small multifamily building for family shelter, something that we should move forward with as an organization. And then the last kind of piece of this is to enhance some of our rental and emergency assistance programs, specifically for families. And again, this all comes with kind of our strategy for investing these funds that are coming our way from the state. So just to start with kind of that, it's the Youth Homelessness Aid Act that was enacted last legislative session. This is one of those that kind of got done at the end, and I think it's going to have some really wonderful opportunities for counties across Minnesota. So what it was a $25 million budget allocation for 5 years, so $125 million total, that is divvied up to counties based on the number of kids that are enlisted as experiencing homelessness based on their kind of McKinney-Vento way of counting. And we've got Melissa here, and she'll talk more about that in a little bit too. But they have their own way that they do this. And so that data, that allocation formula was created. The Olmsted County expectation is for $600,000 to arrive per year. That will probably change a little bit year over year, with the funds expected to be arriving in January of 2023. So again, it was a state allocation, it's state funding that's coming down to the counties. One of the other things, I think, as we talk about how we work with the state of Minnesota, I'm very interested to see how this works at a macro level, because a lot of time is spent by our staff applying for grants from the state. And it seems like that they always want us to apply for every last thing and show every last thing and fill out every little detail. And the fact that this program is a direct allocation to counties, I think is very interesting as we look at how some of these are funded in the future that goes beyond family homelessness. So as we've been working on this now for the last several months, we've been working with our community stakeholders around family homelessness. You can see them on there. And really started to hear a few key themes based on those conversations. And the first one is that schools, which is where primarily a lot of the connections between families and youth and those experiencing homelessness, that schools just in general don't have the best tools to connect to housing resources. There's emails that come out, there's notes that come out. I know Melissa and the other McKinney-Vento coordinators in the county get notes when they hear about an issue, or a teacher hears about a kiddo that maybe isn't able to find, their parents are struggling to find a place to live.
Don't use that word kiddo, okay?
Kiddo?
I've told people before that, and it bothers other people, but they're too shy to say that. That is an offensive word to me. Do not use the word kiddo.
All right.
I'm serious.
I will not use that. Children.
Thank you. I think that's demeaning, very demeaning.
So schools with their children, families, really just, again, kind of that connection. The next one is that, we don't have emergency family shelter in our community, or really we have Family Promise that has a few units, but we really lack some of those options that we need. And then the last kind of theme is that we don't have enough emergency rental assistance options. And so really what we wanted to do here with all of these things was create a system to address family homelessness. So really looking at trying to take the resources that are out there and utilizing these funds that are coming from the state to connect the dots. So we have 3 proposed investment strategies that we're going to be bringing forward for your conversation today. So the first one is to create a family housing support team. The second one is to enhance family shelter options. And then the third one is to utilize some of the funding to connect families to additional rental assistance and homeless prevention aid. And so what I want to do right now is bring Melissa Brandt forward. As all of you know Melissa, she works with Rochester Public Schools. I do want to highlight also that we've been working with the other school districts in the county as well, because this is a county-wide fund. And so what we talk about today will be available across the county and not just in Rochester Public Schools, but I think she has some wonderful information to share.
Yes, so, and I was gonna just mention, if the clicker is the fun part of your day, you need to get out more. Currently, we have had 2 pilot programs running in our schools. One through Riverside, and without getting too much in the weeds, but that one is through a Homework Starts with Home grant. Lindsay is our coordinator there, our navigator there, and she operates at Riverside and then 3 other schools. Additionally, we have a youth housing specialist who operates in our alternative learning center. She just started. We did have someone lost her to the county. You're welcome. And the new person that we just received is actually from the county, so you're welcome. Just to let you know, this, hands down to me, I've been in this position for 12 years, and it has been the most impactful program I've seen in terms of stability in the 12 years that I've been in the school district. So, and that's saying a lot, because we've had some really interesting things, tried some new things, and for this particular program that we've been running, so you can see Riverside's outcomes alone, 28 families in the last year have been served through our housing navigator in the building, which is 41 students, or 10% of Riverside's student population that's been housed. So for us, it really has been like no other program that we've done. The immediacy of access, the pre-existing relationships that exist with families, the ability to have an instant team serving right on site makes the instances of homelessness rare, brief, non-reoccurring, which is all of our goal. In terms of what Dave said about McKinney-Vento, so students defined under McKinney-Vento and students defined under FUD, or HUD. HUD, there's been a study out of the University of Minnesota from Ann Maston that has demonstrated there's no difference in outcomes, regardless if it's a student who meets the HUD definition or a student who meets the McKinney-Vento definition. Meaning those kids who are couch surfing, their outcomes are as abysmal as the kids who are in the shelter or on the street. So this has really been impactful for our kids, and limiting attendance issues, we can impact immediately. The family feels connected, so we're not like so far down the road that the problem is so bad that we can't, cost thousands and thousands of dollars to reset. So that has been the highlight of the work. Is there anything else?
No, just a letter of support.
Oh, yes. The superintendent, I also brought a letter of support from the superintendent. Okay, thank you. From Dr. Pakel. So he is aware that I am here this morning and is supportive of the work.
All right. One question, please.
Yes.
So I just heard you have a program now that you have been implemented. Now I'm hearing Dave that wish to add 5 more FTAs to help supplement this program. Is that what we're talking about?
So there are 2 members right now that work within Rochester Public Schools that do this work.
Which are Rochester School District?
One of them is paid for by Three Rivers, and then the other one is paid for partially by a grant that we had previously worked with the school district on, and then looking to find some long-term funding. But what we're trying to do is take the 2 that are already there and create a team by adding 3 additional staff members. So the total team is 5. There are 2 there today, 3 additional staff that we're talking about adding with these funds.
Well, I read our draft here. I got 5 from us. So
that was probably I probably should have written that more clearly, so I apologize.
First I thought it was 8, but
oh yeah. Oh. We've got to make the dollars work, and those don't.
Basically, whatever system we put together, the two currently involved would be absorbed into a new expanded with another three for a total of 5 in a county program, correct? And the school district basically gets out of it.
Yes, but, yes, and those dollars are coming from the assistant aid from the state that,
So school gets out of it, we get into it. Okay, that's what I want to know.
So that's factual then, that the two right now that have alternative funding sources would become our responsibility?
No, I think I just know. So it's not that, and that's part of why we're talking today, because there's still details to work out. So as we create this team, there are staff that are going to have different funding sources. So part of creating that team is how do we get people to work together? Because the funding source that derives from Three Rivers and the Homework Starts with Home grant and some of the other things that the school district is doing, and then the staff that we would be providing or we would be funding support with the state funds that we're receiving, it's kind of getting them all to work together. And so there's still some details to work out that we don't have all of the answers for yet, but that's part of kind of the next phase of this once we're done. If we get a conceptual thumbs up today, that's where we need to go back to work.
Well, I got more questions, so thank you.
Yeah,
I've got,
Greg first.
thank you. I think I heard this right. I do not want the school district out of this. In order for this to work, there has to be collaboration. School district has to be part of this. I don't want them just handing this off to the county. And I think the superintendent probably understands that, but I know that they have their own financial issues. But I think what we've learned, in order for anything to work and move forward, you have to have everybody part of that collaboration.
Agreed, Commissioner. I think that's part of. So once we move through a conceptual process today, we can start working on that MOU and what that looks like and what is the role of all the stakeholders, and the school district will have a significant role in that. As far as making referrals and contacts and being part of helping us all work together, because they are the experts in education, we're the experts in housing, and really needing to know what both of those areas are in order for kids to thrive.
Jim?
I'd like everybody to listen closely because I'm probably going to be the pariah once again. You know, we have inflation right now about 7%. The state has $9 billion. In a few years, there'll have a $4 billion hole. They've got all this COVID money that they are swimming in. And have we not learned anything? We're going to get a grant from the state. And in about 2 years, when the poo hits the fan again, they're going to yank that funding, and we're going to have to fund this thing. We've got plenty of needs right now, and we're running out of money. It's not that I don't think there's a need. Again, it's not that I don't think there's a need, but we are stretched thin at this point, and I'm not in favor of adding any programs. At a minimum, you're going to have to go a long way to get me to support this, but I will not support it unless you tell me that if this funding goes away or partners start pulling out, we're going to get rid of the program. Because you people have done this for 20 years, whether it's a road project or a social service project. We get money from the state. We cannot stand it. And we get this money, and we're so happy to get it. And 2 or 3 years later, they yank the rug out from under us, and we got to continue to do it. Or otherwise, we're the devil because we want to drop the program. So I've said my piece, and I know everybody hates me, but thank you.
No, I think that's fair. Sheila?
You know, that there is that history. This isn't a grant, though. This is a direct allocation from the legislature for this purpose. And I think as we develop the memorandum of understanding with the school district, we can be clear that it is dependent on the state's source of funding for the positions, so we can protect that interest. In the meantime, we can be helping some kids and some families have the housing they need to have better educational outcomes. And you know, their budget forecast, I agree with you, Jim. I've been through this a lot where, you know, boom and bust. And we can anticipate the state's revenues have been higher than they expected given the pandemic and the economic conditions. We can expect that the economic conditions will change as inflation goes up and people's spending changes. But I think that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do the good we can do while we have the guarantee of the income. And otherwise, would we want to turn this away? No, I don't think we would want to make that investment into our county. Since the state has allocated $600,000, what's the best way to spend it? And to get the best outcomes, and staff are recommending this is the best way to use those funds for the best outcomes. Your skepticism is valid. I mean, we've been through this. Absolutely agree.
So I have questions. So we're essentially talking $3 million over the next 5 years, and you're saying we're going to use a significant portion of it to put staff in schools. Is there anything stopping us from using 100% to build or buy fourplexes to actually have solutions for the?
No, except that we really feel that there's a significant gap right now in connecting people in the school district and school social workers and teachers to housing resources. Yes, you could choose to do that. It's our recommendation that is a significant gap that we should invest these funds in.
My concern is that if the funding dries up and we have these fourplexes or we buy a motel for short-term housing and stuff like that, that stays, we own it. But if the housing dries up and we have staff, well, then we're gonna cut staff and we're raising taxes at a time of economic downturn. Seems to me that we're better off having places for people to stay than people to put them in places to stay.
Mark, Stephanie.
Steph first, I guess.
Is there a possibility, listening to Commissioner Beer's concerns and Commissioner Cascade's concerns, that these positions could be not designated as permanent, but contingent on the allocation continuing?
From my perspective, that would make sense because this is a program that we are implementing on behalf of the state, essentially, to address family homelessness. And so, if that is the program we're implementing here, then those pieces of it should be based on receiving that funding.
Would that be difficult to find people willing to work under an agreement like that?
It can be, I think as we look, that's been always the difficult part, right? Is I know, this starts to.
We'll just take them from you guys.
You start to get outside of my, like when we start to talk to HR and things, yes, it is more of a challenge, and especially for longer term. I think over the course if you're hiring social workers, the amount of turnover that occurs, that if you were to discontinue a program like this, you could probably, over the course of a relatively short period of time, absorb those into other roles.
Matt, you had?
Well, I don't know if you have any more speakers, Dave. I'll wait.
No, I do have more slides to kind of go through the rest. I don't know if you all.
Because I got many questions.
I'm sure. So.
Is anybody opposed to moving forward?
I just wanted to observe that one of the things the timing is pretty good here because hopefully the legislature will end on time and we'll know whether or not they've allocated bonding money for shelter purposes, which I would hope we would be prepared to apply for as well. So, and then look at what the community's needs are for the physical plans. So that's enough.
So we've talked about the housing support team, we've talked about the staffing. So what we're really looking to do is to take the 2 staff that are there and add 3 staff with these funds and take this from a opportunity that I think is piloted in several schools that we've demonstrated is effective to actually make it district-wide and to create a system in place where schools have that connection. So if a school social worker at Gage, where my daughter goes, knows of a kid that maybe is couch hopping or is sleeping in the back of their cars, they have the way to make those connections in order to connect the available resources to that family. So that's kind of the first step of this. That housing support team plays an integral role in making those connections and really embedding those staff in the schools and having that partnership because it truly is, it's a need in our community. But the second piece of this kind of 3-legged stool, I guess, for lack of a better term, that I had a few slides ago, is that we think we need to enhance shelter options. And so what we would recommend as we look at this is to buy a fourplex. You know, whether we buy that with some of the American Rescue Plan Act funds that are either allocated to housing already or some of the remaining funds, or whether we use the HRA levy funds, that's a future conversation. But we really do think that this is a need. So when we have those families that are unable to have a place to live, that we can at least get them housed temporarily. So the idea here is that it's an emergency shelter. So we're talking about a couple of weeks at a time in order to really kind of help with some of those cases where people truly are either out in camping or sleeping in cars or things like that. But really using this as kind of that next piece of that puzzle.
Can I just interrupt?
Yep.
You're specifying HRA or ARPA funds that this $3 million from the state can't be used for that?
We could use that for it. I think it's just the way that I was thinking is that that would probably be about a $500,000 to $600,000 investment, and since it would be capital, that if we use that, that would be all of those funds for a year.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you could absolutely, at least to the most of our knowledge. If the rules change,
Sure.
I'll let you. But yeah.
But we also put $10 million into the coalition. Is that not a source for tapping funding to create this kind of shelter?
Could be. I mean, it could. Yeah. I mean, we have multiple avenues to address, and whether we use the ARPA funds that are already out there, or whether we use levy funds, you know, we can, you know.
I just hate, I was talking to Stephanie here. I mean, we start programs and we do, I'm afraid that we do start programs and we do everything half-assed. I mean, not you personally and not our staff. They try as hard as they can, I get that. But we don't have the resources to do a good job on anything. And then it all just programs really good. And if we cannot do other programs, and that's where I see this thing going. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm popping anybody's balloon, but we cannot do everything. And maybe you can convince me, but you can tell I'm skeptical.
I'm not sure that I can convince you. I can just say that I think that we have, I mean, these are funds coming in, and I guess the question is, how would this board collectively want to make those investments? And this is our proposal that we're bringing forward to really make those investments in the community, and as long as they're there. And if it dries up after 2 years, then, you know, I know that it would not be the first time that the state has broken a promise to counties. But as we're looking at the situation today and the opportunities that are in front of us, again, these are the things that we're looking at. And then I think as a third piece of this is to enhance some of those rental assistance tools. So whether that is kind of our short-term voucher to help people get back on their feet, whether that's first month's, last month's rent for deposits, things of that nature in order to allow us to move forward.
I just want to interject. I don't think it's, you don't want to put me in a position of defending the state, but I don't think the state is breaking a promise if they have a program that says we're going to give you $600,000 for 5 years and then they quit paying on the 6th year.
No.
They're fulfilling their promise. We're the one that's ignoring it, you know.
Can I throw a comment in there?
Sure, Tanya, go ahead.
I heard some concern about, you know, if this project dries up or funding in the future, but think about all the families that would have been helped along the way. And then hopefully there'll be an alternative at the time. And if there's not, then so be it. But at least all those families were helped and put into housing while the program was there. And then, I mean, reality is that's going to be an experience just like the pilot program that gives us data to think about future programs when the time comes. And, you know, just something to think about. But, you know, what's the worst that can come out of this except for families being housed and connected with programs? I don't know, maybe I'm probably not seeing it from the business perspective because I'm not a business person, but that's just a thought I wanted to share. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
So the slide in front of you right now is our very rough cost estimate structure. You can see there that we've developed a plan that would spend the funds that come from the state, and that's what this investment strategy really is. It's how do we invest those funds that are coming in from the state to address family homelessness, and that's where we're at right now. And I think, you know, what we really want to know, I think clearly, while this is not a formal vote on all of these pieces today, we need to know if you think we're moving in the right direction. I think specifically, there's a lot of conversation on some of the staffing needs. So we really need that guidance and feedback to know if we're moving in the right direction. We're interested in knowing your thoughts on, should the HRA one way or another acquire a structure for emergency family shelter? And really kind of understanding if this investment strategy that we've put forward, if there's some things that we're missing on here, or that there's some things that you don't like, kind of understanding that so we know how to move forward and then start to move forward with some of the logistics, whether that be a mid-year staffing request, whether that be moving forward with acquisition of a building as it becomes available, whether that be starting to work with the school district and others on some of the agreements that would need to be in place in order to kind of co-locate some staff. So that's what we have for you today. We are at a point of getting the feedback, and I'll hopefully answer any questions you might have.
Okay, Matt first.
I won't go for it yet. It's too disorganized. I won't buy a fourplex. Temporary housing never is temporary. Is it families, teenagers hanging out there? I have no clue what we put in this place, and I have bad visions of a bunch of teenagers hanging out in the fourplex. I'm sorry. You would need the supervision there. If that's permissible legally, I have no idea. They're minors. Don't know. But the temporary family, no. I'd put them up in a hotel or something way before then. So buying a fourplex, not this guy. Now back to these people we're going to hire. Now I read your draft. We'd have 2 social workers in the high school and 1 in elementary. I can't vision a social worker talking to an elementary kid about their housing. I'm sorry. That involves parents. That involves parents. I don't know how that would work. I really have no clue.
I think.
So that's what's happening. So
So-
what we do is if there's a family that's, say, for example, referred and they're in their car, then what we do is we work on a release, give it to the housing navigator. The housing navigator connects with mom or dad or whoever it may be. So we would never burden an elementary school student with that sort of responsibility.
Well, it never should be. No way.
We
No
wouldn't.
way.
Yeah,
So
as
now
an educator,
why
I know.
we have that in elementary school?
Because this
Blew
particular
a red flag
allocation,
to me.
this particular allocation too is for families and youth. And family homelessness in Rochester exists as well. We absolutely have youth who are experiencing homelessness, but a family is a big priority for us too. And we have around 400 students across from 0 to 21 that we
No.
track.
That one, 18 to 21, I don't consider them as students. What percentage is this of students? You're talking from 18 to 21. They are legal adult now. Is that a government
We can serve
with some
students.
necessary oversight?
We can serve students until the age of 21 if they're on an IEP. So if they have special education services, then what we do is we work closely with the county or with whatever service organization to make sure there's a warm handoff, so to speak, to a student who may need more supports later as an adult. We have like our RAIL program, which we work with students who are high need, 18 to 21-year-olds who are connected with like Project Reach, those sort of things, to help them become contributing members.
Which is good. I've been hearing you've been mentioning programs. What I see, we're getting into the program field that you are doing now. Now, how do we work together? I do not want to see a whole new agency of kids aren't commodities. I agree with you. They're not commodities, but now I'm seeing different groups competing for that. What are we going to do for it? What are you going to do? I'd rather support you in the school district than us getting into it. Until I see a clearer picture on this one.
Don't we have a parallel with the mental health workers that we've had assigned to schools? I mean, there we've said that there's a particular kind of expertise that we don't expect the schools to have. So we have, during the pandemic and other times, we've assigned mental health workers to work in partnership with the schools. And to me, this seems like it's somewhat parallel, but I guess I would look to Ms. Brandt to tell us, how does that work when you have a county mental health worker engaged with the schools, and then how has it worked in working with families rather than the kids directly when there's the need for that kind of family stability intervention?
Right. Well, I have to be careful because, like, I am not in the mental health world, and I'm not in that side of the business. But I can speak to the precedent that we've had with kind of some of the pilot pieces that we've been doing.
You need to get closer to our mic here.
Oh, sorry. So I can speak to like the precedent of some of the pilot pieces we've been doing. And what happens, for example, is if a family comes in and is experiencing homelessness, they may connect in a lot of different ways. The school social worker, our school social work staff then might handle the mental health pieces. But in terms of the housing piece, we would make a referral to one of our pilot um, workers. And right now, even though they're employed with, like, say, Three Rivers or outside agencies, they're embedded in the school district. They have a school district badge. That relationship exists there. They're on site in the schools. And that relationship has not been that way in the past. I don't know. I am not able to access HMIS coordinated entry to see if this family that is now experiencing homelessness is on the coordinated entry list. This person is able to. I don't know whether or not there's FHPAP money or money over here, money, if they're eligible for a county program, this person is able to do that. And what we've found is that then there's this pre-existing trust, a lack of this family to be in their car and go through kind of maybe multiple county systems. It's like that one door again, where we have the family relationships, it's built in, and that this is just one more service like mental health or other practices that we have embedded in the school district.
So if we were going to be working with families and youth, and it was a teenager on their own without a family, they would not. I'm looking to Dave. I was thinking that would be different than they wouldn't be in the fourplex. It would be families with parents and children that would be eligible for the fourplex, and it's more like transitional housing like we do in 105 and other places, right?
Yeah, it's sort of kind of like 105 for families. I think when we look at the 16 to 21-year-old, the youth, the unaccompanied youth, frankly, that's probably, if you want to talk about populations experiencing homelessness, you have families, you have youth, and then you have single adults. We've done a lot of work on the single adults. This is kind of our opportunity to talk about some of the youth or the families, and then really some of those unaccompanied minors is kind of that next piece.
And I'm sorry, just to finish up here. But the project 180 Degrees is seeking state legislative funding, and they're running the youth homeless shelter kind of thing out on the old Von Wald Center. So that is a resource. So we wouldn't be duplicating that either.
No.
Okay, just so we kind of get a sense of who are we really talking about. We're talking about families with children. We're talking about for like the fourplex. For youth adolescents, we're probably looking at Von Wald or something like that, and then the single adults. And then in terms of the extra staff you're asking for, would be people who specialize in housing but work in partnership with school social workers, principals, and the parents of the kids. Okay, thanks.
Jim?
Yeah, I get really confused over this stuff. I'm a lot better with roads and planning and plats and that kind of stuff. I'm good at that. This, not so much. But didn't we Gage, isn't that a family thing? Didn't we buy Gage or rent Gage or do something with Gage to have homeless families there for going to school kids? Is this in addition to that, or am I all screwed up?
So Gage is a housing resource for people who are experiencing homelessness. There is a side for youth, and then there's also a side for families. So one of the things that you could see us doing is once somebody maybe is in that emergency family shelter, if there was an opening at Gage, that might be where we would provide that placement.
So how is that different than? Tell me how this is different than buying the fourplex, or is this adding more to it?
I think it's the difference between like the 105 is a transitional housing facility and the warming center is a shelter.
Okay. So Gage is just a shelter. It's not. You don't stay there.
No, Gage is you stay there for a couple of years. You have a lease. What I'm saying is that the fourplex that we would buy would be that emergency family shelter. So
that'd be a
that would be the thing. Yeah. So think of that as that new fourplex or whatever that would be. is the equivalent of the warming center versus a longer-term placement for a family.
Okay, I apologize. Like I say, I do not understand a lot
It's
of this stuff.
utterly confusing to me.
Jen?
I have
so-
a comment.
Go ahead if you.
I think that Gage is also, there's an age limit. It's for younger families, if
No.
I'm not mistaken.
I don't think
So
that's
like
correct.
at least
No.
it's not.
No. Ken, go ahead.
Oh,
So looking at this in my own logical fashion that you may not agree with, or anybody may not, my colleagues, the money's allocated from the state. It's in legislation. It's not a grant. It's 5 years, which generally I'm a little more comfortable that the money will appear for 5 years. So number one, whatever we do with this program, you got to decide it's going to show up. It's going to be in our checkbook. We decide what we want to do with it. Is this the right program or not? The people that we put into this, we're going to try to collaborate closer with school district existing resources. All great, complementary. You tell the people in 5 years, if this goes away, if state doesn't renew it, you're gone. And you're absolutely right. We may be able to absorb them because of natural turnover and not cost us any more money, not necessarily keep the program alive, but not just throw them back out on the street. It's a possibility. I'm with Matt. I'm not interested in investing our money in a shelter. I do think the state needs to step up, and hopefully they will this year with money that is, there's lots of legislation. They got boxcars full of money. We know. One time, but these are the kind of things that you spend one-time money on. And then we accept the responsibility for that maintenance and staffing and so on. We'll service it. But building it, different things. So that's the way I see this. I don't have a big problem with where you're allocating it. I think it's good to focus on that area. We have a problem with youth and families. And like you said, shelter, temporary, and then we always, just as she said it initially, emergency, short term, and they move along because of local problems that they can't fix, or we get them into supportive housing and transition and make their life a little easier so that they can then focus on family, job, training, and so on, which there are a lot of resources in this community. So that's where I come from on this. I don't have a big problem with it. I listen to the discussion. I don't have a problem with the program. But at the end of 5 years, money goes away. Jim, Matt, and I said, then it goes away. Sorry. Because I'm in the camp of not really trusting the state. I have 20 years of experience. Stop it. It's not derogatory. It's just based on history. Facts. So there is this track record that exists, and hard to necessarily remove yourself from that track record. There's other entities I could also talk about, but that's enough.
So
said my piece.
my barriers include, one, we're at 2, and I understand that there's a need for more, but to go from 2 to 5, I haven't heard that that a difference going from 2 to 5 is needed as compared to going from 2 to 3, which is a 50% increase in staffing in a certain area would be considered a huge increase in staffing. Now we're talking 150% increase in staffing. I haven't seen evidence that is needed, that we need 150% more people as compared to 50% more people. 2, if the funding does dry up, and the state is saying it's going to dry up, they're not saying they're going to fund it in perpetuity. If the funding does dry up, it's probably going to dry up at a time of economic downturn. So we're going to be in a poor position to continue funding it when people are having a hard time paying their rent. And we will have to raise levy to cover these positions. So right now we're in a position of surplus because the government's printed a lot of money. So we're in a position of surplus, and we're going to start programs that we don't have any idea how we're going to continue to pay. And when we pull the plug, it's going to be at a terrible time. I would rather see us have assets that stay with here. Our biggest problem is finding places for people to stay, not finding people to put them in places, in my mind. Greg or Stephanie?
No, everybody's asked my questions. We're good.
Stephanie, anything to add?
Well, I think if we can, if the staff, the people we hire understand that it's not a permanent position, we wouldn't be pulling the rug out from under them. I don't like to do that either. But I can see, as Tanya said and other people, at least for these 5 years, we would be doing something positive that would make a difference in the lives of people rather than not accepting the money at all. If that's how I hear people saying.
Is that even an option? I don't think that's an option on the table.
I don't think that's an option. I think the question would be if we used it for like the capital, we would have to provide the services with that. So we'd have the same costs probably
We have to figure
associated with the staffing of how we would take care of that. So yeah.
Oh, I would say it's safe to say that at some point you're going to get 4 votes from this board to 5 votes from this board to accept $600,000 a year from the state for 5 years. So I think that's a risk.
Mark, I don't think that's a question. Look, we'll take the money.
Yeah, we're going
to take the money.
to take the money.
How we want to.
What do we do with it? That's what we're trying to decide.
We're going to take the money, and I think we got 7 people with 7 different.
Right.
We're not deciding on this today, right?
You're not, but it is,
Direction.
usually it is good to kind of have an idea of where things are, and I'm
luck with
trying to count numbers in my head. I'm not gonna lie. I'm trying to say, okay, I break this down, this, and to try to figure out where 5 of you are is a little bit of a challenge on this one. I'm not gonna lie. And I think even trying to break down the different pieces of this, because I've heard people who are supportive, probably have some concerns about all of it, have some concerns about the property component, and then also have some concerns about the staffing component. So I don't know if we need.
And what's your point?
You need to go make some sausage.
So yes, I guess that's the I think that there are probably 5 of you that support moving forward with the staffing component of this.
I would not us. I want to work with the school.
Right.
I don't know why we're adding 3 of our staff to their 2 staff or 3. I prefer they have it now, leave it there.
So you would prefer that we contract with the school district?
I'd write a contract with the school.
So that they can hire 3 housing navigators who would then in turn work with our
We gave them the
housing
full
staff.
Them this much.
Okay.
That's basic.
I think Ms. Brandt
wanted to
wants to
mention
offer
too, for the state piece in terms of this funding, it's based on the numbers of McKinney-Vento students identified by the schools. So the minimum a county could get was $5,000. And so the result of this is the work that we're doing in the schools. It's the 400 kids we've identified, and we continue to work. Otherwise, the money wouldn't exist. So, and we've been partnering too with it's not just RPS. It's, we've talked to Byron, we've talked to Stewartville. We're working with other school districts to build the support for all Olmsted County kids. So I just want to.
No, and I think that's a good point, and I think that, yeah.
I have a question for Matt, to make sure I understand your position, Matt. Are you thinking that we would accept this allocation but hand it to the schools?
Not all of it. I wouldn't.
Not all of it.
Contract.
I'd have a contract written.
Whatever 3 FTEs cost.
Well, I don't know if well, again, I questioned 5 total.
I know.
That's really,
Is
and
that
I don't deal with these people every day, but that seems a little, with all the other programs, I think that's excessive, personally. But again, I would make an MOU or a contract with the school district. We get 600,000. I'll just throw this number out. 300,000 goes to the school district. Here, buy your people. Hire your people. Whatever. That's the money. If we don't pay them, they're responsible to these people later on. And I take the other 300,000 and rent short-term facilities to house people.
you see it trying to meet this program both ways?
Yes. And I absolutely don't want to build something or buy something.
Yeah.
for it.
How would we do that then?
We make a contract with the school
Contract.
district.
We could contract.
We
with
pay
rental places.
we pay for the
Yeah.
their
I
salary.
understand the staffing, but how would we,
Lease
how would we
properties.
provide shelter if we don't
We just lease, we'd go to,
Lease.
lease?
we'd lease, we lease a building
Right,
or,
I agree. You
places.
lease a building like we've done.
if you need it, here, we're gonna lease a place. That's what I would prefer.
I just wanted to clear.
Heidi, I'm turning to you because it's 1 minute after 2, or and I guess now it's 2 minutes after 2. I know that there are other meetings to get to, so I don't want to. I think there's.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I think that our agendas on the other boards may not take a full hour. If you need 5 more minutes to wrap it up.
You can get us.
I don't know
we have
if I can do
5 minutes.
anything in 5 minutes today, but I can
Nothing that
try.
happens in 5 minutes.
I
We're
think
on the non-5 minute zone.
I think what I hear, is there's probably a need to maybe talk in maybe smaller groups and to refine kind of what this looks like a little bit more.
I
And
think you
to
got some
probably.
broad brush ideas.
Oh, yeah. Well, we do they're broad brush because we didn't want to dig into all of the details and then find out that we went in the wrong direction. So there's a reason that it was a little bit of broad because we wanted to allow some flexibility. And I think this allows us to get some input and attempt to move forward. What I'm kind of hearing, I think, is that there are maybe four-ish of you that support all of this.
We want to take the money. I'm hearing we want the money. We want to maybe contract with the school to do some of the business, especially the people, and then use the balance of the money from the county to figure out some housing, whether we rent some or buy some. I mean, I'm not a buy some guy, but you could have that. Those are kind of the 3 planks I'm hearing. Take the money, work with the school district, and let them hire the people to facilitate, and then work on getting some housing through the county, whatever that may look like.
Clarify, we're going to get the money.
Right.
We're going to get the money. It's going to appear in our checkbook. If we choose to contract with the school district, and FTEs, give them the money to fund that position for 5 years, and then we decide what to do with the rest of the money. Whether it's lease, hotel rooms, whatever, until we believe that the state comes through and actually provides money to build a permanent structure that we can then support with this money and then in the future.
So I'd like to see the school district then come forward with an argument that we need to go from 2 to 5.
All right.
Isn't that the 5 minute?
Before we adjourn, Sheila's good.
Sure, I just wanted to note that Jo Marie Morris is in the room. Jo Marie, if you would stand up, you probably all know her from Jeremiah program. But she is now under contract with the Coalition for Housing for the next 6 months to help with the strategy development and long-term planning for the coalition. And we're glad to have her and glad to have her here today. So
Thank you, Jo Marie.
Right. Before we adjourn, I want to compliment the school district on taking up the issue a long time ago in the first place. We're all interested in making sure that students can succeed and that they can be part of the regular community when they graduate. And you can't do that without the school district being concerned about this in the first place. So even though obviously there's some little wrinkles along the way, the major point is the school district has taken this on and they have very good people working on it. So thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.